Welcome back, everybody. Look at this image next to me. When I and my mom were watching the World Championship matches, my mom used to ask me what exactly are both of them writing down on that papers after each move. I tried explaining to my mom, but it took a little bit of time to explain. So that is why I'm making this video to tell you what exactly they're writing down and what is the use of writing down whatever they're writing. Usually, these players are given a sheet called as chess score sheet. It's like a table with three columns. You in each of the blocks write down what move each player is playing, both white and black. So in this table, there will be three columns. The first one shows the move order: first move, second move, third move, and the second one is what move does white play, and the third one is what move does black play. So it goes step by step. So in the first move, what does white play, what does black play? Second one, what does white, what does black play? Third, and it goes on. So just like in chemistry, you name the compounds, right? CO2 is carbon dioxide. CaCl2 is calcium chloride. So just like naming compounds in chemistry, we have a simple nomenclature, simple naming style in naming the chess moves in a chess game. So that is what is filled in all these blocks. So let us look at an example of a chess move. Um, yeah, RE5. This is read as the rook goes to E5. So if you haven't understood, let's split into two halves, R and E5. Here, R is the piece. The rook is the piece that is moved, and e5 represents the square that the rook has moved to. So to understand deeply, we can study how to name a square first and then how to name the piece. So how many squares are there in a chessboard? Total of 64 squares. So chessboard is basically a 8 into 8 grid where each columns are named lettered as A B C D E F G H, and each rows are named as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 and 8. So one thing to note here is that the columns are lettered in small letters, not capital letters. We will look into it later. So now let us name a square in this block. Now look at the green square. How do you name it? First look at the letter downwards, that's E. Then look at the number, that's 5. So you name it as E5. Let's check another example. Look at the red square. How do you name it? C and 4. C4. Similarly, all the 64 squares on the chessboard can be named according to the column number and the column letter and the row number. And now we spoke about the squares. How do you name a piece? So the king is K, queen is Q, rook is R, B is bishop, and the knight is not K because K is already taken by the king. So the knight here is N. And the last one, pawns are a little bit confusing because there are 8 pawns in the chessboard. So whenever you see a move and there is no capital letter in it, then it means that it is a pawn. For example, if the move is just e5, then it means that the e pawn goes to e5. If it is something g6, it means that the g pawn goes to g6. Let us look at that later. So look at this example. There is a rook in e2 square. Imagine the rook goes here. How do you name this move? Now look at the square, it is e5. So you write it as r e5. And how do you read this? The rook goes to e5 or just rook to e5. Let's look at another example. Now there is a bishop somewhere in the board and it needs to go to the green square. How do you write this move? Look at the green square. How can we name the square? F6. So it is bf6. Here the B represents the bishop and F6 represents the square. You read this as bishop goes to F6 or bishop to F6. Simple. Now, I told you there is a small confusion in pawns. So look at this example. There are some 5 pawns in this board, but I only want to move the e pawn to e4 square. So we just have to write it as e4, just the square. No need to write p for pawn, just the square. So how do you read this? You read it as the e pawn goes to e4. Suppose instead of the e pawn, I want to move the f pawn to f3. So just write it as f3, so it is understood that the f pawn goes to f3. Now there are 5 kind of moves that you can play in chess, and let us look how each 5 is named. The first one we have already checked. R e5 is just rook goes to e5. Simple. The next one is an X. You can see an X in between. Rx e5. Here the X is when a piece captures another piece. Let us look an example. Now you see there is a white rook and a black bishop. Now imagine the rook captures the bishop. So in this case, you write it as Rx e5, which means the rook captures e5. You don't have to write that the bishop is being captured. It is just the square that needs to be mentioned. So the rook goes to e5, capturing a piece, or rook captures e5. Simple. The next one is a check. Whenever there's a check made, you have to add a plus symbol in the end. Let's look at one example. So in this case, you can see a king somewhere on d5, and imagine I'm moving the rook. The rook now goes to e5 and it's giving a check on the king. How do you write this? Just add a plus in the end. Rook to e5, check. So whenever any piece moves to a square that gives a check, then write a plus symbol in the end. And the fourth type is a checkmate. This is the last move that happens in the game. So whenever a checkmate happens, you're supposed to add a hashtag in the end. For example, look at here. There are 3 rooks, one in the fourth row, one in the sixth row, and there is a third rook. You just have to move the rook to the fifth row. And now it's a checkmate because the king cannot move anywhere. So in such case, when a checkmate happens, just add a hashtag in the end and you read this as rook goes to e5 checkmate. And the last one is a special one. It's usually there is a special move in chess called as castling, where the king and the rook switch positions. Now look at this. Yeah, they both switch positions in between, and this kind of a move is called as castling. It happens only once in the game, so you just need to write it as O-O. You need not write the king or rook or anything, just O-O represents the move castling, or you read it as the king castles. Both are the same. So now that we have learned about all the 5 kinds of moves in chess, let's see how to apply those to a game that we are playing. So now look at the, sorry, yeah. Now look at the score sheet above and the game beside me. So for each move, let us write whatever has to be written in the score sheet. So here, suppose if we are moving, I'm playing white, so we are playing e4, we're pushing this pawn to the center. How do you write this? Look at the square. So on e4, so just write the name of the square e4. Look up. Now black plays. Imagine black wants to come here. What is the square? E5. So just write e5. So the first, both the moves are done. Let's go to the second one. Imagine I'm pushing this knight to here. What is this square? F3. So how do you write this? Nf3, which means the knight goes to f3. Similarly, he pushes his knight maybe here. What is the square? C6. So nc6. Now let's push this pawn to the center. What is the square? D4. Just write it as D4. And now let's make a capture. Now the opponent is capturing my pawn. How do you write this? So now you see that this pawn was in the E column, and now it's capturing my pawn on the D column, D4. So you write it as EXD4, which means the E pawn captures the D4 square. Now let us make a capture of capturing back the pawn with the knight. Again, how do you write this? Knight takes d4. So it is nx d4. Same thing. Now his knight captures our knight. What square is this d4? So the same thing, nx d4. Now let's capture back with the queen. So qx d4. Queen takes d4. Now imagine the opponent plays a pawn move, maybe pushing the b pawn to b6. How do you write this? Just b6. So it is understood that the b pawn goes to b6. Now let's give a check. So the queen goes to e5. So now you can see this is a check. How do you write this? With a plus. So q e5 plus, which means queen to e5 check. Now the other queen blocks the check from here. So how do you write this? The square is e7. So it is just queen to e7. Next we capture. Okay, now look. Now imagine I'm capturing his queen. See, there are two things that are happening here. One is that we are capturing a piece, and one is that we're giving a check. So we'll use both the X and the plus symbol. How do you write this? Queen X E7 plus, which means queen takes E7 check. Now the king will capture back, right? So when you capture the queen back, how do you write this? King takes E7, KX E7. Maybe we'll give a check with the bishop. So you can see there's a check. How do you write this? The bishop goes here to square g5. So it is just bishop g5 check. Done. Now the king goes to e8 maybe. How do you write this? King to e8, k e8. So I hope you have understood the basics behind writing, how to write a move on each of the columns. Now to finish off this, we'll try for a checkmate move as well. Imagine you're given this position. All I have to do is to move the king here, sorry, queen here, and it's a checkmate. So how do I write this move? Queen here, and it's a checkmate. How do I write this? How do I name this move? Now there are two things happening here. One is that you're capturing a piece that was in this square, and one is that you're giving a checkmate. So you are using both the X for capturing and hashtag for checkmating, and hence you will be writing this move as queen x f7 hashtag, which means queen takes f7 checkmate. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you all like it and you have understood something about a score sheet and why it's useful. It's really useful for players to look at their own matches. Like you play a game, you make the score sheet. Later on, you can take the score sheet and assess your own mistakes in it and how to improve yourself later on. And usually, when top grandmasters play, they are, you see in the even in the World Championship, their score sheets are taken and published so that people can take and learn those tips and tricks they have used there. Maybe even assess the mistakes they have done there, and sometimes even understand their playing style as well. And this is how certain very old games, even 100 years back, these score sheets were maintained so that even those old games are still famous right now because of the score sheets. Thank you for watching the video, and let's get back another video another day. Thank you.